This is the Education Business Podcast for consultants and business owners providing services in schools. I'm Claire Riley, and I'll be sharing how to start, grow and scale your education business. One of the things that can be surprising when you enter the education business world is how seasonal having an education business can be. So when we think of seasonality, we tend to think about holiday lets and the travel industry, but not really other businesses or industries. But it does make sense when you think about it. Schools are very much tied into a yearly pattern. And so when I say seasonal, perhaps you're thinking about the sales dip in the 6-week holidays, or not being able to sell to schools in the 13 weeks of school holidays that are spread across the year. And while this is obviously a thing, it's not the only thing that makes education business seasonal. There's just so much more to it than that we're going to talk about today. So while the whole world is cyclical, schools work in a very prescribed cycle, which affects the income of education businesses and gives us financial highs and lows that are seasonal. And that's true whether you're selling to schools, teachers, or both. And one of the steps to feeling secure throughout this seasonal income cycle is being really clear what's included in the cycle, understanding it, and particularly how it affects you and your own business, because we're all different. Knowing which groups are ready to buy and when, what happens each year that affects sales in the academic year, and being able to see whether or not you're actually on track, whether you've missed something. That's essential. So I recommend mapping out the year with what's happening and when to help you understand the seasonal effect on your business. So we've obviously been riding the seasonal wave at Classroom Secrets for 9 years now. And so I'm going to share what I've learned on the journey and what we've managed to improve in the later years, which has made it a little less nerve-wracking. I've only got 3 points to cover today, but they're packed with useful information. So the first thing is that you're going to have to accept that it's seasonal. There's not a fix for it. So back in the day, I used to use a lot of freelancers to create resources for me, and then I proofread all of them on my own. And I didn't employ anyone to help me with the proofreading because I was scared of committing. And I've talked about this on the podcast before, about my fears. And one of the reasons I was scared of committing was the financial commitment, because our income was very seasonal, and I thought, oh, well, we'll be able to pay them at some points of the year, but what happens if we can't pay them at other points of the year? But now at Classroom Secrets, 9 years in, we've got around 50 employees that we obviously need to pay a salary for every month. So did I fix the seasonal income problem? Well, I want to let you into a secret. My company still has seasonal income. That doesn't mean that we go days and days without sales like we used to back in the day, but it does mean that there are still highs and lows through the month and also on different days of the week. And this isn't a failure. It's just how our education business works, and it's how schools and teachers buy. So if you're hoping that one day that your business won't be seasonal and you'll have this constant stream of steady sales all year round, you're going to need to go into a different business. You're going to have to find a way to make this work for you. And this is why I use Profit First. So the best thing about seasonal businesses is that there are windows of time with high sales potential, where you can put all of your energy into marketing your product or service. So you could also decide that you want to spend the windows of time with low sales potential working on your product or service instead. So in order to survive and, most importantly, grow, you really have to focus your efforts on what's achievable in the windows of time with high sales potential. You can't just ignore that they exist and hope that you can make up for it in the quieter months, because once you've missed it, you've missed it, and it is important to make them important. So you might be able to increase sales in quieter times. Absolutely, you can do that. But it's going to be harder. So you should absolutely focus on increasing sales in busier times to compensate for the dips. It's just easier. Teachers and schools will be in the right frame of mind at certain times of year, and it's your job to figure out when they are. If your sales targets in the important months don't make you uncomfortable, then they're not big enough. They're not big enough. So I've already mentioned that you might choose to use the quieter times to focus on your product or service, but you can also think about what could drive sales in the quieter times, and that could be for the quieter times or for the times with higher sales potential. Okay, so number 2, you've got to identify what to focus on when. So I've already touched on that a little bit, but you can't focus on everything at once. So if there's only you or you've got a small team, then the seasonality can be really useful for you anyway, because you can plan how you can use your time effectively so that you don't miss these big sales windows. And then you'll know how to use the periods of drought to make sure that you have a big impact in the next big sales window. So work out what the calendar is. What's your calendar in your particular business? Where have you seen sales increase and decrease across the year? What big events happen that you need to consider and make sure you're trying to sell for? You could use this to plan your products and services as well. And ideally, you'll be able to sell to schools and teachers as they have different high points in the year, times when they're ready to buy from you and times when they're not. So make sure you take all of the key dates into consideration. Things like when teachers are returning to school, when they're doing exam prep, budgets, all those things. It's not just about teachers needing something, it's also about when schools are getting money. And number 3, a percentage model. So I mentioned in my first point that I was scared to employ people because of the seasonality of finances, and I was worried that I wouldn't be able to afford it over the summer. And obviously I employ many people now. And we actually switched people to employment rather than freelancing back in 2017. So I did have a way that I managed the seasonal income then, but it wasn't a very good one. Basically, we just drove sales and then saved all the money in the company just in case. But I didn't pay me an head what we deserved, and I didn't get a grip on what it meant to have a seasonal business at that time. But it got to a point where I knew that we just couldn't continue like this, and we began to resent it, and it was no one's fault but our own. And I've talked about this before. So we needed to get a better way to manage the finances that didn't mean stockpiling for a rainy day. It wasn't helping growth in the company because it didn't help anyone to feel like the company needed to continue being brilliant. We could just coast along. And it's not that you shouldn't stockpile, by the way, you should, but a sensible percentage instead of everything. And in that way, you as a business owner gets paid as well. So we started using a percentage model profit first. And you do this on your income each month. So you have a percentage that is tax, a percentage that is salaries, a percentage that is operational expenses, a percentage that is profit. So you get to set what you want this profit to be so that you can make sure there is one at the end of the year. And you also have a percentage which is owner's comp, which is basically what you as the owner gets paid as a salary. So for us, it's what Ed and I get paid each month. So we get paid a percentage of the sales. So that's interesting because sometimes that means we don't get paid as much as other times. So it works as a really good incentive for you to really push forward with that. And it can be a bit scary. It doesn't help us sit back and relax because that's not what it's intended to do. But we are directly affected if the company doesn't do as well that month. But it's not as scary as it sounds because what we do is we try and make sure that we base it on a sensible percentage. It's not a percentage that's going to make it really difficult to live in August, for example. But we also take that into account with our living expenses as well. So that's really helped us. It might not work for everyone, but dividing your money into pots each week or each month based on percentages could really help you stabilize your mindset, even though your business is seasonal, making sure that you've always got money in there, but you're not just having to stockpile for a rainy day, not knowing whether the money's going to continue to come in. So there you have it. They're my 3 steps to managing seasonal income in your education business. So, if you'd like to join me in Education Business Club, it's really not long now until Education Business Club takes on a new form. There's going to be monthly trainings created by me. For more in-depth help and advice than you get on the podcast, for growing your education business, for starting it, for scaling it. So if you want to know when that's going to be live, then just send me a message on LinkedIn and I can get back to you and let you know when that's going to be live. But I'm really excited about the changes in Education Business Club. It's been a really informative 4 months with the beta sessions, and I'm really looking forward to how we're all going to grow our education businesses over the next year.
Thank you for listening to the Education Business Podcast. To get more information to grow your business, sign up at educationbusinessclub.co.uk.